Welcome, I'm John, and today I'm going to tell you an exciting story. Millionaire pretends to be paralyzed to test his fiancée, but the poor cleaning lady wins his heart. The California sun blazed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Wallace Tower, casting long shadows across the mahogany desk where Ethan Wallace sat, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. At 34, he had everything the world told him to want: a tech empire worth billions, a penthouse that overlooked the San Francisco Bay, and a fiancée whose beauty graced magazine covers. Yet as he stared at the engagement photo on his desk, Lauren's perfect smile, his own carefully composed expression, he felt nothing but the familiar weight of doubt pressing against his chest. "Mr. Wallace, your 4 o'clock is here." His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Ethan didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached into his drawer and pulled out a faded photograph, its edges worn from years of handling. A younger version of himself smiled back, his arm around a woman whose name he'd tried to forget. Vanessa. She'd loved him, or so he'd believed, until the prenuptial agreement appeared. Then came the tears, the accusations, the revelation that every whispered "I love you" had been calculated, rehearsed, a performance worthy of an Oscar. He'd learned his lesson then. Money changed everything. It poisoned every relationship, every friendship, every declaration of love. It transformed genuine emotion into transaction, turning people into actors playing roles in the theater of his life. "Sir?" his assistant prompted again. "Send them in." Ethan slid both photographs back into the drawer, his jaw tightening. As his legal team filed in to discuss the latest acquisition, Ethan's mind wandered to Lauren. She'd said yes without hesitation when he proposed at that charity gala 3 months ago, the diamond ring catching the light as cameras flashed. The society pages had erupted with excitement. Silicon Valley's most eligible bachelor finally settles down. But late at night, when sleep evaded him, Ethan replayed their conversations, searching for cracks in her affection, analyzing every word for hidden motives. Did she love him? Or did she love the idea of being Mrs. Ethan Wallace, with access to his black cards and invitations to events where presidents and celebrities mingled? The meeting dragged on, but Ethan barely heard the discussions about market share and profit margins. An idea had been forming in his mind for weeks, growing stronger with each passing day. It was extreme, perhaps even cruel, but he needed to know the truth. He needed certainty before he walked down that aisle. What if he lost everything? What if the money, the status, the power, what if it all disappeared? Would Lauren stay? Would she push his wheelchair, change his clothes, wipe away his tears? Or would she vanish like morning fog, leaving nothing but excuses and apologies? By the time the lawyers left, Ethan had made his decision. He pulled out his phone and called his private doctor, Dr. Marcus Chen, one of the few people he truly trusted. "Marcus, I need to see you. Tonight, it's urgent." 2 hours later, in the privacy of Ethan's penthouse, he laid out his plan. "You want to do what?" Marcus's eyes widened behind his wire-rimmed glasses. "I need you to help me stage an accident. Make it look like I'm paralyzed from the waist down." Ethan's voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly as he poured himself a scotch. "I'll use a wheelchair, undergo therapy, the whole performance. I need to know if Lauren loves me or my bank account." "Ethan, this is insane. You can't fake a disability." "I can, and I will." Ethan turned to face his friend, and Marcus saw something in those eyes that made him pause. Not arrogance or cruelty, but a desperate, aching need for truth. "I've been lied to before, Marcus. I won't marry someone unless I know, with absolute certainty, that she loves me for me. Not for Wallace Industries. Not for the lifestyle. Me." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying the man he'd known since college. Finally, he sighed. "If I help you with this, you have to promise me something. When you find your answer, whatever it is, you end this immediately. No prolonging it, no revenge plots, just the truth, and then you move forward. I promise." They shook hands, and Ethan felt something shift inside him, a mixture of relief and apprehension. In 2 weeks, he would stage his accident. In 2 weeks, he would finally learn whether love could survive the absence of luxury. What Ethan didn't know, as he gazed out at the glittering city below, was that his test would reveal a truth far different from what he expected. The answer to his question wouldn't come from Lauren at all. It would come from a woman he hadn't even met yet. Julia Matthews wiped down the counter of the small diner for the third time that hour, her shoulders aching from the double shift. The graveyard shift paid an extra $2 per hour, money she desperately needed. Through the window, she could see the first hints of dawn painting the Oakland sky in shades of pink and gold, a beauty that felt distant from her exhausted reality. "Table 4 needs a refill," barked Sandra, the night manager, without looking up from her phone. Julia grabbed the coffee pot, forcing a smile as she approached the trucker who'd been nursing the same cup for hours. He was kind enough, at least. Some customers treated her like she was invisible, or worse, like she was something stuck to the bottom of their shoe. At 28, Julia's life had taken a path she'd never imagined. 7 years ago, she'd been a nursing student with dreams of helping people, of making a difference. Then came unexpected pregnancy, followed by her boyfriend's swift departure and her father's heart attack. She'd dropped out to care for him, to raise her daughter Emma, to work whatever jobs would pay the bills. Her father had passed 2 years later, leaving her with nothing but memories and medical debt. Now, Emma was 6, bright, curious, with her mother's dark curls and a gap-toothed smile that made every sacrifice worthwhile. But raising a child alone in the Bay Area was like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. No matter how hard Julia worked, there was never enough. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. A text from Mrs. Chen, her neighbor who watched Emma during night shifts. "She's still sleeping. Don't worry. Take your time." Julia's chest tightened with gratitude. Mrs. Chen was one of the good ones, charging almost nothing for childcare because she knew Julia's situation. But even that small amount added up. "You look dead on your feet," Sandra said as Julia returned to the counter. For once, her voice held something other than irritation, maybe even concern. "When's your last day here?" "Friday." Julia felt a flutter of nervousness mixed with hope. "The new job starts Monday." She still couldn't believe her luck. 3 days ago, she'd responded to an ad for a live-in housekeeper position. The pay was more than double what she made at the diner, and it included room and board, a private cottage on the estate where she and Emma could live. The interview had been conducted by a stern-faced woman named Margaret, the head of household staff, who'd looked at Julia's calloused hands and tired eyes with something like understanding. "The employer values discretion, dedication, and kindness," Margaret had said. "This isn't just cleaning. Mr. Wallace requires special care right now. He was in an accident. He's in a wheelchair." Julia had nodded, her nursing background suddenly relevant again. "I can handle that. I took care of my father when he was sick. I'm not afraid of hard work." Margaret's expression had softened slightly. "I can see that. When can you start?" The memory of that moment still felt surreal. A chance to give Emma stability, a real home, maybe even save some money. Julia didn't care that her new employer was some billionaire. She'd be invisible to him anyway, just another staff member maintaining his mansion. What mattered was Emma's future. The sun had fully risen by the time Julia's shift ended. She drove her 15-year-old Honda through the awakening city, past the gleaming towers of San Francisco visible across the bay, monuments to wealth she'd only ever glimpsed from a distance. She thought about the Wallace estate in Palo Alto, where she'd soon be working. She'd looked it up online, a sprawling property with manicured gardens and a main house that looked like something from a movie. When she arrived at Mrs. Chen's apartment, Emma was awake, eating cereal at the small kitchen table. Her face lit up when she saw her mother. "Mama!" She launched herself into Julia's arms, and Julia held her tight, breathing in the strawberry scent of her daughter's shampoo. "Guess what, baby?" Julia pulled back, tucking a curl behind Emma's ear. "Remember I told you about the new job? We're going to have our own little house. You'll have your own room." Emma's eyes went wide. "My own room? Really? Really?" Julia smiled, but tears pricked her eyes. She'd been sleeping on a pull-out couch in their studio apartment for 3 years, giving Emma the only bedroom. "Things are going to get better, I promise." As Emma chattered excitedly about how she'd decorate her new room, Julia allowed herself a moment of hope. She didn't need much from life, just enough to give her daughter the opportunities she'd lost. If that meant cleaning some rich man's mansion, so be it. She had no idea that her new employer was about to change everything. The accident was scheduled for a Saturday evening, timed perfectly with Lauren's return from a week-long fashion event in New York. Ethan sat in his study, reviewing the plan one final time with Dr. Marcus Chen and his head of security, Robert Hayes, a former Navy SEAL who'd been with him for 8 years, and could be trusted with anything. The car will be totaled, but you won't have a scratch on you, Robert explained, pointing to photographs of the staged crash site. We'll use the Tesla from your collection, the one you rarely drive. Single vehicle accident on Highway 1 late afternoon. Witnesses will report you swerved to avoid a deer. And the medical records? Ethan's voice was steady, but his hands betrayed him, fingers drumming against the desk. Marcus pulled out a folder thick with documents. Everything's prepared. MRI scans showing spinal trauma, borrowed from a real patient who consented, identity obscured, hospital admission records, prognosis, paralysis from the waist down, possible recovery with intensive therapy, but unlikely. I've briefed a trusted team at the hospital. They'll corroborate everything. Lauren lands at SFO at 3 a.m., Ethan said, more to himself than the others. She'll go straight to the penthouse. That's when you'll call her. Marcus, tell her I've been in an accident, that she needs to come to the hospital immediately. Robert shifted uncomfortably. Boss, I have to ask one more time. Are you sure about this? Once we start, there's no going back. Not without looking like a complete... I'm sure. Ethan cut him off, but his conviction wavered for just a moment. Was he sure? Or was he so damaged by past betrayal that he was willing to orchestrate an elaborate lie to protect himself from future pain? He thought of Lauren, her laugh at gallery openings, the way she fit perfectly into his world of charity galas and board meetings. She'd said all the right things, made all the right gestures. But there were moments, small ones, where he'd caught something in her eyes, a calculation, a measurement, as if she were constantly assessing the value of her investment in him. When this is over, Marcus said quietly, and you have your answer, whatever it is, we talk, really talk, about why you felt you needed to do this. Ethan nodded, unable to meet his friend's eyes. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Ethan moved through his routine, meetings, calls, one last dinner with Lauren at their favorite restaurant overlooking the bay. She looked stunning in a red dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, her blonde hair swept up elegantly, diamonds glinting at her throat. I've missed you, she said, reaching across the table to touch his hand. Her fingers were cool, her skin perfect. I've missed you too. Had he? Or had the week of her absence felt more like relief than longing? Mother wants to move the wedding up, Lauren continued, her eyes bright with excitement. And she thinks September would be perfect, the weather's beautiful, and we could have it at the estate in Napa. What do you think? Ethan took a sip of wine, buying time. Let's talk about it after this next business trip. I have some things to finalize first. Something flickered across Lauren's face. Impatience, maybe, or frustration, but it disappeared so quickly he might have imagined it. Of course, darling. Whatever you think is best. Saturday arrived with clear skies and warm sunshine. Perfect weather for a drive along the coast, which is exactly what Ethan had told his assistant he'd be doing. At 2:30, he left the city in the Tesla, Robert following at a discreet distance in an unmarked van. The staged crash site was 20 miles north, a curve in the highway with just enough isolation. As Ethan drove, his phone buzzed with a text from Lauren. Landed. Can't wait to see you tonight. I have so much to tell you. Love you. He stared at those last two words. Love you. Did she? Would he finally know for certain? At 3:15, Robert's team executed the plan flawlessly. The Tesla's front end crumpled against strategically placed barriers, airbags deploying, glass shattering. Ethan allowed himself to be placed on a stretcher, his body limp, his expression carefully neutral despite the adrenaline coursing through him. The ambulance ride to the hospital felt surreal. EMTs, all briefed, all part of the plan, checked his vitals, spoke in urgent tones about spinal trauma, about calling in specialists. Ethan kept his eyes closed, breathing slowly, trying to ignore the voice in his head screaming that he was making a terrible mistake. But it was too late to turn back now. In 6 hours, Lauren would walk through the hospital doors, and Ethan would finally learn the truth, no matter how much it might hurt. Lauren's heels clicked sharply against the hospital's polished floors, echoing through the sterile corridor like gunshots. She'd arrived within an hour of Marcus's call, her face carefully composed into an expression of concern. Ethan watched her approach through half-closed eyes, his body positioned in the hospital bed with meticulous attention to detail, IV line in his arm, monitors beeping rhythmically, legs motionless beneath the thin blanket. Oh my God, Ethan! Lauren's voice cracked perfectly, her hand flying to her mouth. She rushed to his bedside, her Chanel perfume arriving a moment before she did. What happened? They said you were in an accident, that you... She stopped, her eyes traveling down to his legs, then back to his face. That you can't... I can't feel anything below my waist, Ethan said, his voice deliberately weak. He'd practiced this moment, rehearsed the right amount of devastation to convey. The doctors say it's likely permanent. Lauren's perfectly made-up face crumpled, and for a moment, just a moment, Ethan felt a stab of guilt. Tears spilled down her cheeks, smudging her mascara. She gripped his hand, her fingers trembling. No, that can't be right. You're ETHAN WALLACE. You can afford the best doctors in the world. Surely there's something they can do, some specialist. Marcus is already consulting with everyone. Ethan squeezed her hand, watching her carefully. But right now, we have to face the reality. This might be my life now. A wheelchair, constant care. I won't be able to do most of the things I used to do. Lauren pulled a chair close to the bed, still holding his hand. She was saying all the right things. We'll get through this together. And I don't care about any of that. I just want you to be okay. But Ethan noticed how her eyes kept drifting away, focusing on the monitors, the IV, the window, anywhere but directly at him. The wedding, Ethan said quietly, letting the words hang in the air like a test. Lauren's grip on his hand tightened almost imperceptibly. We'll postpone, of course. You need to focus on recovery, on therapy. She paused, and in that pause, Ethan heard volumes. There's no rush, is there? We have all the time in the world. Not, I want to marry you tomorrow, wheelchair or not. Not, nothing changes between us. Just postponement, delay, wait and see. Over the next 3 days, as Ethan was transferred from the hospital to his Palo Alto estate, specially modified with ramps and accessibility features that Robert's team had installed with impressive speed, he watched Lauren's performance continue. She visited daily, bringing flowers and magazines, sitting at his bedside for exactly 1 hour before claiming she had appointments, obligations, things she simply couldn't cancel. Mother needs help with the foundation gala, she explained on the 3rd day, already gathering her purse. And I have that fitting for the Vogue shoot, but I'll be back tomorrow, I promise. Ethan nodded from the wheelchair that would be his constant companion for the foreseeable future. Of course, don't let me hold you back from your life. Something flickered in Lauren's eyes. Relief, perhaps, that he was being so understanding. She kissed his forehead, a gesture that felt more like obligation than affection, and left in a cloud of expensive perfume. That evening, Margaret appeared in the doorway of his study, where Ethan sat staring at financial reports he couldn't focus on. The head housekeeper was a woman in her 60s, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, who'd managed his household for a decade with quiet efficiency. Sir, I wanted to inform you that the new housekeeper will be arriving Monday morning, Julia Matthews and her daughter. I've prepared the cottage as you requested. Ethan barely looked up. Fine. Whatever you think is best, Margaret. She's a good woman, sir. Hard worker, and... Margaret hesitated, which was unusual for her. She has experience caring for people with limited mobility. I thought that might be helpful. I have nurses for that. Yes, sir. But sometimes what we need isn't just medical care. Margaret's voice was gentle, almost motherly. Sometimes we need someone who sees us as human beings, not patients. Julia has that quality. After Margaret left, Ethan wheeled himself to the window overlooking the gardens. The sun was setting, painting everything in gold and shadow. Somewhere out there, Lauren was probably at a restaurant or gallery opening, being photographed, being admired, living the life she loved. A life that apparently didn't have room for a fiancé in a wheelchair. He'd gotten his answer, hadn't he? Or at least part of it. What Ethan didn't know was that the real answer was still coming, arriving Monday morning with a worn suitcase and a 6-year-old girl who believed in fresh starts. Julia's hands gripped the steering wheel as she drove through the gates of the Wallace estate. Emma pressed against the window beside her, eyes wide with wonder. The driveway seemed to stretch forever, lined with oak trees that created a canopy of green overhead. When the main house finally came into view, Emma gasped, "Mama, is that a castle?" "No, baby, just a very big house." But Julia understood her daughter's awe. The mansion was stunning, all white stone and tall windows, with gardens that looked like they belonged in a magazine. Their entire apartment could have fit in the garage. Margaret was waiting at the side entrance, her posture formal, but her eyes kind. "Welcome, Julia. And you must be Emma." She offered the little girl a small smile. "I have cookies in the kitchen, if your mother says it's all right." Emma looked up at Julia with pleading eyes, and Julia nodded, grateful for the gesture. As they followed Margaret inside, Julia tried not to gape at the marble floors, the chandeliers, the artwork that probably cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime. "Your cottage is through the gardens," Margaret explained, leading them down a stone path. 2 bedrooms, full kitchen, your own space. "You're not expected to be on call 24 hours, but Mr. Wallace does require assistance throughout the day. He has nurses for medical needs, but he needs someone for everything else." The cottage was more beautiful than anywhere Julia had ever lived. Sunlight streamed through windows overlooking a rose garden, and the furniture, though simple, was elegant. Emma immediately ran to the smaller bedroom, squealing with delight at the twin bed with its white quilted cover. "This is too much," Julia said quietly, her throat tight. "It's what you've earned by agreeing to work here." Margaret's voice was firm. "Mr. Wallace can be difficult, especially now. The accident changed him. He's angry, withdrawn. Most of the staff try to avoid him when possible." Julia straightened her shoulders. "I'm not afraid of difficult. I can handle it." "I believe you can." Margaret handed her a folder. "Your schedule, house rules, emergency contacts. Take today to settle in. Tomorrow, you'll meet Mr. Wallace." That evening, after unpacking their few belongings and sharing a simple dinner, Julia tucked Emma into bed. Her daughter's eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but shining with happiness. "I love my room, Mama. I love the garden." "Can I pick flowers tomorrow?" "We'll ask," Julia said, smoothing Emma's curls. "Remember what we talked about. We're guests here. We need to be respectful, quiet, well-behaved." "I will be, I promise." Emma yawned. "Is the man in the wheelchair nice?" Julia paused. "I don't know yet, but even if he's grumpy, we treat him with kindness. Sometimes people who are hurting act mean because they don't know how to show their pain." After Emma fell asleep, Julia stood at the cottage window, looking up at the main house. Most of the windows were dark, but one room on the second floor glowed with light. She wondered if that was where ETHAN WALLACE sat, this man whose life had been turned upside down by tragedy. Despite his wealth, despite this beautiful prison of a home, he was suffering. Julia understood suffering. She'd held her father's hand as he died, felt the weight of dreams deferred, known the terror of checking her bank account and finding almost nothing. But she'd also learned that suffering could make you bitter or it could make you compassionate. The choice was yours. Monday morning arrived with nervousness fluttering in Julia's stomach. She dressed in simple black pants and a white blouse, professional, unobtrusive, and braided her hair back. Margaret had arranged for Emma to spend the day at a local summer program, giving Julia time to learn her duties. "Ready?" Margaret asked as they approached the study where Mr. Wallace apparently spent most of his time. Julia nodded, though her heart raced. Margaret knocked once, then opened the door. "Sir, this is Julia Matthews, your new housekeeper." The man in the wheelchair had his back to them, facing windows that overlooked the gardens. When he turned, Julia's first thought was that he looked younger than she'd expected, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair and eyes that held a deep, aching exhaustion. But there was also something else in those eyes, a guardedness, a wall built so high she could practically see it. "Another one," he said flatly, his gaze sweeping over her dismissively. "How long will you last?" The previous housekeeper made it 3 weeks before she couldn't handle the atmosphere. Julia met his eyes steadily. "I'm not easily discouraged, Mr. Wallace. I'm here to work, and I'm here to stay." For just a moment, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or curiosity. But it vanished quickly, replaced by cold indifference. "We'll see," he said, turning back to the window. "You can start by leaving me alone." The first 2 weeks were a test of Julia's patience and resilience. ETHAN WALLACE was, without question, the most challenging person she'd ever dealt with. He snapped at staff, rejected meals, and spent hours in bitter silence. When Julia brought him coffee, he complained it was too hot. When she adjusted the temperature, it was too cold. Nothing satisfied him, and she suspected that was precisely the point. But Julia had made a promise to herself and to Emma. She wouldn't quit. She wouldn't let this man's pain drive her away. On the 3rd Monday, she entered his study to find him hurling a book across the room, where it slammed against the wall and fell to the floor. His face was contorted with rage and frustration. "Get out," he snarled without looking at her. Julia calmly walked to where the book had fallen, a biography of Steve Jobs, and picked it up. She examined the damaged spine, then placed it gently on his desk. "You'll regret ruining a good book," she said quietly, "especially one about a man who understood what it meant to face impossible obstacles." Ethan's head snapped toward her, eyes blazing. "Don't you dare presume to understand what I'm going through. You have no idea. You're right. I don't know what it's like to lose the use of my legs." Julia's voice remained steady, but there was steel beneath the calm. "But I do know what it's like to lose things that matter. I know what it's like to have dreams ripped away, to feel like the universe is punishing you for no reason. And I know that throwing books and shouting at people who are trying to help you doesn't make the pain go away. It just makes you lonelier." The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan stared at her, his jaw clenched, clearly torn between ordering her out and something else. Finally, he looked away. "Why are you still here?" His voice was quieter now, almost defeated. "Most people can't wait to escape my presence." "Because I don't scare easily," Julia said, moving to open the curtains he'd kept closed. Sunlight flooded the room, and Ethan flinched. "And because underneath all this anger, I see someone who's terrified." "That's nothing to be ashamed of. You don't know anything about me. I know you're Ethan Wallace. I know you built a technology empire. I know you were in a car accident that changed your life." Julia turned to face him. "But I also know you're human, and humans aren't meant to sit in dark rooms feeling sorry for themselves." For the first time since they'd met, a ghost of something, amusement, respect, crossed Ethan's face. "You're either very brave or very foolish." "Probably both," Julia admitted. "Now, are you going to eat the lunch I brought, or should I prepare for another food-throwing incident?" "I haven't thrown food. Yet. There's always a first time." She placed the tray on his desk, a sandwich, fruit, and the tea. She'd learned he actually preferred to coffee, though he'd never admit it. "And I'll be back in an hour to check on you." As she reached the door, his voice stopped her. "Julia." She turned, surprised. It was the first time he'd used her name. "Thank you." The words seemed to cost him something, but they were genuine. From that day forward, something shifted. Ethan still had his dark moods, his moments of bitter withdrawal, but Julia noticed small changes. He stopped rejecting every meal. He allowed her to open the curtains. Once, she even caught him reading the Steve Jobs biography, a bookmark carefully placed to save his spot. Julia developed a routine. In the mornings, she'd bring breakfast and read him news highlights. Not because he couldn't read them himself, but because he seemed to appreciate the human connection. In the afternoons, she'd work nearby, cleaning or organizing, available if he needed anything but not hovering. They began to talk, small conversations at first, about the weather, the gardens, mundane things, but gradually, deeper topics emerged. Julia told him about Emma, about her father's illness, about the nursing degree she'd never finished. Ethan shared fragments of his life, too, carefully edited pieces that revealed more than he probably intended. "You miss working with your hands," Julia observed one afternoon, watching him fidget with a pen. "Building things, creating." Ethan looked startled, as if no one had seen that part of him in years. "I started in my garage, you know, before Wallace Industries became this." He gestured vaguely at the opulent room. "I used to solder circuits, write code until 3 in the morning. Now I just sign papers and attend meetings. Or I did, before the accident." Julia finished gently. She hesitated, then said, "You could still create things. Your hands work fine." Something flickered in his eyes, possibility, perhaps, or the memory of passion long buried beneath responsibility and wealth. "Maybe," he said softly. "Maybe." Lauren's visits had become predictable in their brevity and timing. She arrived every Saturday at 2 o'clock, stayed for exactly 90 minutes, and left with apologetic smiles and vague promises about next time. Ethan tracked it all from his wheelchair, his initial test evolving into something more painful, a clear pattern of abandonment disguised as support. It was during one of these visits, on a warm afternoon in late July, that Lauren met Julia for the first time. Julia had been arranging fresh flowers in the main hall when Lauren swept through the entrance, her designer sunglasses perched atop her golden hair. She paused, looking Julia up and down with the kind of assessment wealthy people give to those they consider beneath them. "You're new," Lauren said, her tone neither friendly nor hostile, simply factual, the way one might comment on new furniture. "Yes, ma'am." I'm Julia, the housekeeper. Julia kept her voice polite, professional. How is he today? Lauren asked, already moving toward the study. She didn't wait for an answer. Julia watched her go, noticing the expensive handbag, the perfectly manicured nails, the way Lauren walked through this house like she owned it, or expected to. This was the fiancée Margaret had mentioned, the woman who'd supposedly stood by Ethan after the accident. But Julia had noticed something over the past month. Ethan never mentioned Lauren unless asked. He didn't light up when she visited. If anything, he seemed more withdrawn after she left, retreating into silence that felt like sadness. Later that afternoon, after Lauren had departed right on schedule, Julia brought Ethan his evening tea. He sat by the window, staring out at the gardens where Emma was playing, her laughter carrying on the breeze. Your daughter is beautiful, Ethan said quietly. She has your smile. Julia felt warmth spread through her chest. Over the weeks, Ethan had slowly opened up to Emma's presence, even allowing the little girl to bring him flowers from the garden. Emma, with a child's unfiltered honesty, treated Ethan like he was simply another person, not a billionaire, not someone to be pitied, just Mr. Ethan who lived in the big house and sometimes looked sad. She's my whole world, Julia said, setting down the tea. She hesitated, then added, Your fiancé seems nice. Ethan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Lauren is many things. Nice is one way to describe her. He turned from the window, his eyes meeting Julia's. You don't have to be polite about her. I know what you see. Julia sat down across from him, something she'd started doing in recent weeks. Their relationship had shifted from employer-employee to something harder to define, not quite friendship, but deeper than mere professional courtesy. I see a woman who doesn't visit very often, Julia said carefully, and when she does, you seem sadder after she leaves. Observant. Ethan's smile was bitter. Would you like to know the truth? She's waiting for me to release her from this obligation. She won't be the one to leave. That would look bad in society pages. But she's hoping I'll do the honorable thing and let her go. Have you asked her what she wants? I don't need to ask. I can see it every time she checks her watch, every time she finds an excuse to cut her visit short. He paused, something vulnerable crossing his face. Before the accident, I wondered if she loved me or for my money. Now I know, neither. She loved the idea of what we represented. Power couple, society wedding, the perfect image. But love, real love doesn't evaporate when life gets difficult. Julia thought about her own life. The boyfriend who'd fled at the first sign of responsibility. The friends who'd disappeared when she could no longer afford their lifestyle. No, she agreed softly. Real love stays, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Their eyes held for a moment, and Julia felt something pass between them. Understanding, recognition, a connection she hadn't expected to find in this mansion full of expensive things, but empty of genuine warmth. You stayed, Ethan said, even when I was unbearable, even when I gave you every reason to quit. I told you I don't scare easily. Julia smiled. Besides, someone had to make sure you didn't destroy all your books. Ethan laughed, a real laugh, the first she'd heard from him. The sound transformed his face, erasing years of stress and revealing the man he might have been without all the weight he carried. From the garden, Emma's voice called out, Mama, look at the butterfly. Julia stood to go to her daughter, but Ethan's voice stopped her. Julia, would you and Emma join me for dinner tonight? Not as staff, just as people. I'd like the company. Julia's heart swelled with an emotion she couldn't quite name. We'd love to. As she walked toward the garden, she didn't see the way Ethan watched her go, something shifting in his chest, a crack in the wall he'd built around his heart. Dinner that evening was unlike anything Julia had experienced at the Wallace estate. Margaret had set up a table on the terrace overlooking the gardens, the setting sun painting everything in gold. Emma, dressed in her best sundress, sat between Julia and Ethan, chattering about the butterflies she'd seen and the flowers she'd learned to name. And that one is called a dahlia, Emma said proudly, pointing to the garden. Margaret taught me. It's her favorite. Margaret has excellent taste, Ethan said, his tone gentle in a way Julia had never heard before. My mother loved dahlias too. She planted the first ones in this garden. Where is she now? Emma asked with a child's innocent directness. Julia tensed, ready to redirect the conversation, but Ethan simply said, She passed away when I was 22. Cancer. My grandpa died too. Emma said matter-of-factly. Mama says he's watching over us from heaven. Maybe your mama is watching over you too. Something flickered across Ethan's face. Pain, yes, but also something softer. Maybe she is. After Emma went to bed, Julia returned to find Ethan still on the terrace, a glass of wine untouched beside him. The night had grown cool, and stars were beginning to appear. She's asleep, Julia said, sitting down. She loved tonight. Thank you for including her. I should thank you. I can't remember the last time I laughed during a meal. Ethan poured her a glass of wine without asking, a gesture that felt intimate in its assumption of welcome. Emma reminds me that there's still innocence in the world, still joy. I'd forgotten. Children have a way of keeping us honest, Julia said, accepting the glass. They don't see our facades, they just see us. Is that what you do too? See through facades. Julia considered this. I see what people show me, but I also pay attention to what they don't say. The silences between words, the things they're afraid to admit. Ethan turned to face her fully, and in the dim light, his eyes held an intensity that made Julia's breath catch. And what do you see when you look at me? The question hung between them, weighted with meaning. Julia could have deflected, kept things professional, maintained the careful boundary they'd been dancing around for weeks. But something about the night, the wine, the vulnerability in his voice made her answer truthfully. I see someone who's been hurt so badly that he stopped trusting anyone. Someone who built walls so high that even the people who want to help him can't get through. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. I see someone testing the world, waiting for it to fail him. And I see someone who's terrified that he might be unlovable without his money and power. Ethan's expression didn't change, but his hand tightened around his wine glass. That's uncomfortably accurate. I also see someone who's kind to a 6-year-old girl, even when he's drowning in his own pain. Someone who listens when I talk about my father, even though he's dealing with his own grief. Someone who's stronger than he thinks he is. Julia. Ethan's voice was rough with emotion he seemed unable to control. I should go, Julia said quickly, suddenly aware of how close they were sitting, how easy it would be to cross a line she had no business approaching. He was her employer. He was engaged. This moment, this connection, it couldn't mean what it felt like it meant. She stood, but Ethan caught her hand. Not forcefully, just a gentle touch that asked her to wait. Lauren and I, it's over. It's been over since the accident, even if neither of us has said it out loud. His thumb traced a small circle on her palm, and Julia felt that simple touch reverberate through her entire body. She's coming tomorrow to officially end the engagement. She doesn't know I've been expecting it. Ethan, I know this is complicated. I know I'm your employer, that there's a power imbalance, that I'm still in this chair playing out a lie that's become more real than I ever intended. He looked up at her, and Julia saw raw honesty in his eyes. But I need you to know something. These past weeks with you have been the most genuine connection I've felt in years, maybe ever. You see me, the real me, and you haven't run away. Julia's heart hammered against her ribs. I should still go. I know. He released her hand. But Julia, tomorrow, after Lauren leaves, will you sit with me? Just sit with me. Yes, she whispered, and fled into the night before she could say anything more. Back in the cottage, Julia pressed her hands against her flushed cheeks, her mind racing. This wasn't supposed to happen. She wasn't supposed to feel this way about ETHAN WALLACE. But she did. God help her. She did. Lauren arrived at 11 the next morning, earlier than usual, and Julia knew immediately that this was the day. She could see it in the stiffness of Lauren's posture, the way she clutched her purse like a shield, the absence of her usual pretense of cheerfulness. Julia busied herself in the hallway, close enough to hear, but far enough to maintain propriety. She told herself she shouldn't eavesdrop, but her feet wouldn't move. Ethan, we need to talk. Lauren's voice carried through the study door, sharp and businesslike. I know. Ethan's response was calm, almost resigned. You're here to end things. A pause. Then Lauren's voice, defensive now. Don't make me the villain in this. You know as well as I do that everything's changed. This isn't what I signed up for. What did you sign up for, Lauren? Ethan's question was quiet but cutting. Be specific. Don't. Her voice cracked slightly. Don't do this. Don't make me say things that will hurt us both. You mean things like, I can't marry a man in a wheelchair? Or, I fell in love with your lifestyle, not you? Which particular truth are you afraid to say out loud? Julia's chest tightened. She could hear the pain beneath Ethan's words, the confirmation of everything he'd feared. "That's not fair," Lauren said, but her protest was weak. "I tried, Ethan. I really did. But every time I come here, every time I see you in that chair, I can't imagine this being my life. The stares, the limitations, the embarrassment of having a disabled husband." Ethan finished coldly. "Yes." The word burst out of Lauren like a confession she'd been holding back for weeks. "Yes, and I hate myself for feeling that way. But I can't help it. I wanted the ETHAN WALLACE who took me to galas and board meetings, who stood beside me at charity events, who looked perfect in photos. Not this." The silence that followed was devastating. "Thank you," Ethan finally said, his voice hollow. "Thank you for being honest. It's more than you've given me in months. I'll make a statement to the press," Lauren continued, her tone shifting to practical. "Something about us wanting different things, growing apart. I won't mention the accident. I'm not a monster. Just leave the ring on the desk." Julia heard movement, the soft clink of metal on wood, then Lauren's footsteps approaching the door. Julia quickly moved down the hallway, but not before Lauren spotted her. "You," Lauren said, her eyes narrowing. "You've been here through all of this, taking care of him." "It's my job," Julia replied carefully. Lauren studied her for a long moment, and something like recognition passed across her face. "He looks at you differently. I've noticed." She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "Be careful. Men like Ethan Wallace don't fall for women like you. Not really. And even if they do, his world will eat you alive. You'll never fit in, never be accepted. You'll always be the help who got lucky." The words were designed to wound, and they found their mark. But Julia lifted her chin. "Maybe. Or maybe what he needs isn't someone who fits into his world. Maybe he needs someone who sees him as a person, not a status symbol." Lauren's expression twisted into something ugly. "You're deluding yourself if you think this ends well for you." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble with finality. Julia waited several minutes before entering the study. Ethan sat in his wheelchair, staring at the engagement ring on his desk, a massive diamond that caught the light and scattered it into fragments. "You heard?" he said without looking up. "Some of it. I'm sorry." "Don't be." Ethan picked up the ring, turning it in his fingers. "This was always going to happen. I just needed to see it for myself, to know with certainty that she never loved me, just what I represented." Julia moved closer, her heart aching for him. "On what she said, about you being in the chair, that's her failure, not yours. You're still the same person. You're still brilliant, still capable of creating and leading and loving. The chair doesn't change that." Ethan looked up at her then, and Julia saw tears threatening to spill over. "Julia, I need to tell you something. About the accident." "Mr. Wallace!" Margaret burst into the room, her face pale with panic. "Sir, there's a reporter at the gate. Someone tipped them off about Miss Morrison ending the engagement. They're asking for a statement, and there are photographers. Handle it, Margaret. Tell them no comment." Ethan's voice was weary. As Margaret hurried out, the moment between them shattered. Ethan wheeled himself to the window, his shoulders tense. "I should go," Julia said softly. "Stay, please. You promised you'd sit with me after she left." So Julia sat, and they remained in silence as the afternoon light shifted and changed. Two people bound by understanding, separated by circumstances neither knew how to overcome. 3 days after Lauren's departure, Ethan made a decision that would change everything. The lie had gone on long enough. What had started as a test had transformed into something he never anticipated, a connection so genuine that maintaining the deception felt like a betrayal worse than any he'd experienced. He sat in his study at dawn, Dr. Marcus Chen across from him, the weight of confession heavy in the air. "I'm ending this," Ethan said. "Today, I need to tell Julia the truth." Marcus leaned forward, his expression concerned. "Are you sure? Once you tell her, there's no taking it back. She'll know you've been lying this entire time." "I know." Ethan's hands trembled slightly. "And she has every right to hate me for it. But Marcus, I can't keep deceiving the one person who's been completely honest with me. She sees me, really sees me, and I've been lying to her face every single day." "What about Lauren?" "The test worked. You got your answer. Lauren was never the answer I needed." Ethan looked out at the gardens where he'd watched Julia and Emma play countless times. "I thought I was testing whether someone could love me without my status. But Julia taught me something more important, that love isn't about tests or proof. It's about showing up, being present, seeing someone's pain and choosing to stay anyway. Marcus studied his friend. You love her. I do. The admission felt like breathing after being underwater, and she deserves the truth, even if it means losing her. 2 hours later, Ethan asked Julia to meet him in the gardens. He'd abandoned the wheelchair, standing on legs that worked perfectly, his heart pounding with fear and hope in equal measure. Julia arrived with Emma, who immediately ran to examine a butterfly on a rosebush. When Julia saw Ethan actually standing, her face went pale. Ethan, her voice was barely a whisper. You're standing. I don't understand. Julia, please sit. He gestured to the bench, and she sank onto it, her eyes never leaving his face. There's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you weeks ago. And then he confessed everything. The fake accident, the test for Lauren, the elaborate deception involving doctors and medical records. He watched Julia's expression shift from confusion to understanding to something that looked like betrayal. You were never paralyzed, she said flatly when he finished. This was all a performance. Yes, Ethan's voice cracked. I'm so sorry, Julia. I never meant for this to happen. I never meant to meet you, to care about you, to lie to me. Julia stood, her hands shaking. I took care of you. I worried about you. I told you things about my life, my pain, my fears, and you were lying the entire time. Not about everything. Ethan stepped toward her, desperate. My feelings for you, those are real. The connection between us, that's real. Julia, you changed everything for me. You showed me what real compassion looks like, what genuine care means. You didn't see a billionaire or a disability. You saw a person. That's something I've never experienced before. Because you were pretending to be someone you're not. Julia's voice rose, pain evident in every word. How can I trust anything about this? About us? You built our entire relationship on a lie. I know. Ethan felt tears on his face. Unashamed. I know, and I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. But Julia, please understand. I was so broken by past betrayals that I couldn't trust anyone. I thought I needed proof, evidence, a test. But you taught me that love doesn't work that way. Real love is a leap of faith. Julia wrapped her arms around herself, tears streaming down her cheeks. I need to think. I can't be here right now. Julia, please. Emma, Julia called to her daughter. We're going inside. As Julia walked away, Ethan felt his heart breaking in a way that had nothing to do with pretense or performance. This was real pain, the consequence of his own choices, his own cowardice. Margaret appeared at his side, having witnessed everything from the terrace. What will you do now? I don't know, Ethan admitted, but I won't give up. I can't. She's the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I destroyed it with my own fear. Then you'll have to prove to her that the man she came to care for, the one she saw beneath all the walls, that man is real. Not the billionaire, not the test, but the person you became when you were with her. Ethan looked toward the cottage where Julia had disappeared, determination settling over him like armor. He'd spent months testing whether people could love him. Now it was time to prove he was worthy of being loved, not because of what he owned, but because of who he chose to be. The real test was just beginning. The end. Did you like this story? Would you have done anything differently? Tell me in the comments. See you next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe now to receive more exciting stories that you won't want to miss. Thank you very much.